Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Marianne Hyland, Dean of the Robert B. Willemstad School. Here to welcome you to a Dawn Center speaker event. This is one of a series that help us to connect with the business community. Today's topic, transforming customer relations and customer experience through technology, should be a wonderful session that will be moderated by Professor Stephanie Berger. Our speakers today are Mr. Alex Owanka and Mr. Anil Sood and Mr. Ian Ziskin. If you have any questions for the speakers, please feel free to put them in the chat. Now, Catherine Lin will introduce the moderator and speakers for today's session. Catherine is a marketing major. She's a senior here at Adelphi, and she's also an admissions ambassador, a member of the National Residence Hall Honorary, and a part of the Willemstad Leadership Scholars Program. Catherine, I'll turn it over to you.
Thank you, Dean Hyland. It is my pleasure to introduce the moderator and speakers for today's session. Our moderator for today's session is Professor Berger. Professor Stephanie Berger is an adjunct professor at Adelphi University, and she teaches undergraduate and graduate courses in marketing. She is currently the Director of Marketing and Communications at Reform Pension Board, and she has worked extensively in marketing and communications for many financial services firms, including UBS, Charles Schwab, and JP Morgan Chase. She holds a bachelor's degree in Russian language and literature from the University of Maryland and an MBA from Adelphi University. Our first speaker is Mr. Alex Owanka. He is currently a Solutions Consulting Director for Salesforce Professional Services. He has over 14 years of Salesforce implementation experience, with 10 of those years implementing solutions as a consultant for various consulting companies, including Salesforce. He holds a bachelor's degree in finance and an MBA from Adelphi University. Our next speaker is Mr. Anil Sood. He is Chief Technology Officer at Optimizely, a global leader in the digital experience platform category. Optimizely offers comprehensive solutions for marketers and developers to orchestrate, monetize, and experiment their digital customer experience through content management, B2B and B2C commerce, AI engagement, customer data management, and experimentation. He holds a bachelor's degree in computer engineering at Drexel University. Our next speaker is Mr. Ian Ziskin. He is the president at Exact Excel Group, LLC, and has over 40 years of experience as a business and human resource leader, board advisor, consultant, entrepreneur, teacher, speaker, and author. He is the co-founder and partner of Business Insight Group, and co-founder and leader of the Consortium for Change. Ian has a master's degree in industrial and labor relations from Cornell University and a Bachelor of Science degree in management from Binghamton University. Professor Berger, I turn it to you.
Thank you, Catherine, and welcome to the students and to our esteemed panelists. They're all very interesting, and I think they'll have many good insights for you today. So we're just going to start by asking each panelist to introduce their company and the mission of their company, starting with Ian, then Alex, then Anil.
Great, thank you, Stephanie, and it's great to be with everybody today. I appreciate the invitation. As you probably picked up from the introduction that Catherine provided, I might have a little bit of a different background than some of you folks, particularly interested in the information technology, digital transformation space. In that, I grew up about 40 years, as we were saying, in the human resources and leadership game, basically divided into two separate but related chunks. So the first 28 years of my career, I worked for large companies all over the United States. And toward the latter part of my corporate life, I was the chief HR officer for two companies, most recently Northrop Grumman, which may be a name that many of you recognize, being from Long Island, as many of you are, in the aerospace and defense business. About 12 years ago, I launched my own coaching and consulting business called Exact Excel Group, where basically the mission of my organization is work with leaders as a coach, do a lot of leadership development, and I also do quite a bit of advisory work with smaller, more entrepreneurial kinds of companies. And I think perhaps the reason I ended up being invited to join this panel today is I'm also the lead author of a book that just came out a few months ago called The Secret Sauce for Leading Transformational Change. So a lot of what I'll be contributing to the panel discussion today will be from the context of larger scale transformational change, as opposed to being an expert, which I'm not, on digital transformation or information technology. It's great to be here.
Great, thank you, Ian. And I do think that transformational change is an underpinning of organizations that either start with digital transformation and then that mushrooms into something bigger, or vice versa. So Alex at Salesforce, what's your role?
Perfect. Thanks, Professor.
Yeah.
So I'm Alex Wonka. I'm a director in the professional services group at Salesforce. Salesforce, for those who don't know, is a company that basically created an online platform where businesses can run their businesses completely online. So that means everything from how they market, how they sell, how they provide service to their customers. And it's basically, in many ways, one of the tools you use to actually drive a technical transformation within a company, right? They play the technology part of that transformation. So I've been doing this for 15 years. I actually started while I was at Adelphi. Professor Suri helped me write my thesis, and then was my thesis advisor for that. And during that time, I was actually a Salesforce administrator out on Long Island in Plainview. So it started off as a system administrator, just learning how to use the tool, how to click it, doing some basic stuff, making $20 an hour, which is pretty good for being a student at Adelphi at the time. And then slowly took that into getting into consulting and just implementing Salesforce as a tool to drive change for bigger and bigger customers. And now I actually work at Salesforce, implementing Salesforce for our customers and internally as well. So
Thank
looking
you.
forward to talking to all of you.
Great. Anil, tell us about Optimizely, what they do in the world.
Yeah, great. Like Alex, I come from a software vendor. So Optimizely has been around for a long time, and we specialize in the area of the market we call digital experience platform. So digital experience platform is basically it's tools that allow businesses to optimize the digital touch points that they have with their customers. So in that vein, we specialize in commerce, content management, personalization, experimentation, recommendation engines, and customer data management. So where Salesforce is mostly known for the back-end CRM, customer record management, we are much more about that first line touch point with the customer. So what that means is that customers that buy our software can go and implement it to create their website, yes, but all of the other channels that they interact with customers as well. So email marketing or transactions through commerce engines. We'll get into some examples a little bit later of what that software can sometimes be implemented to do, but it really runs the gamut. We are shaped from about 8 major acquisitions over the past 10 years. And so, I'm excited to speak about transformation, not only from the customer perspective, but also from the Optimizely perspective. As we brought along all of these various organizations, integrated them together, it's presented really interesting challenges and solutions, and a lot of opportunity to grow and learn with the business. So thank you for having me.
You're welcome. Okay, so we're going to start with the basics. We have these 2 terms, transformational change and digital transformation, and everybody might be like thinking, oh, I know what that means, but let's just start from the beginning and have our panelists define it from your perspective. So I'm going to go to Ian first with explaining what transformational change is. It's sort of broader based than digital transformation.
Yeah, I'll share my definition actually right from the experience of putting this book together that I was referring to a few minutes ago that recently came out, where we were trying to get our arms around what transformational change actually means. The way we ended up expressing it is it's about completely rethinking and repositioning the what, the why, the how, the when, where, and who associated with dramatically improving some things. And the things that we're working to dramatically improve generally fall into the categories of the effectiveness, the happiness, the health, and or the survival of someone or something. And there's a lot of words there, so let me just pull back on that for a second and parse it out a bit. What we should be thinking about when we're thinking about large-scale transformational change is it's comprehensive, it's systemic, it's sustained over a long period of time rather than a tweak or something that we change in the organization or even about ourselves that's more temporary and much more specific. So think comprehensive, think large scale, and think systemic in the sense that it's some connection between, you know, all the elements of the what, the why, and the how, and the when, the where, and the who associated with having to bring that large scale transformational change about. I'll start with that as the foundation, and then we can build out from there.
Great. So I actually think we'll switch this up a bit. And before getting to digital transformation, Ian, if we can stick with you, and if you can give an example of a transformational change problem that a client came to you with and how you helped them solve it.
Yes, sure. But I'm going to do it in a slightly different way than from the client perspective. I'm actually going to take you back to my chief HR officer days at Northrop Grumman, because it actually builds on a little bit about what Anil was just talking about in terms of growth of a business through acquisition. So this was a period of time when over about a 10-year span, the company made 20 rather significant acquisitions, but did very little to integrate them together. All of a sudden, what we were finding from a customer standpoint, that we were coming across in a way to a lot of our customers as being extremely disjointed, not particularly collaborative. Many of our customer-facing people were showing up on the customer's doorstep in a week or a month without even knowing that other people from the company had been there. So it was a very disorganized, kind of an externally facing approach. So we went on a mission basically over the course of about a 5 to 7 year period to make the company more collaborative from the inside and create more of a one company culture and mindset. And there are obviously, there are a lot of different pieces and parts to making that happen, but I'll just emphasize for the moment, a lot of the work tended to focus on getting people on the same page in terms of values and behaviors. You know, what did we expect from people at every level of the organization in terms of how we interacted with one another? What were some of the definitions of collaboration, what we were expecting people to work together seamlessly on in order to create more of one face to the customer? And also a lot of change around systems and processes so that we had the data to be able to have different parts of the company share information that was required to operate the business in a more collaborative way. And that became part of our digital transformation, which was a subset of the larger scale transformation that we undertook.
Great, thank you, Ian. So I'm going to go to Alex, and if you can give yours and or Salesforce's definition of digital transformation and an example of a problem, client problem that you solved.
Sure. Yeah. So, I mean, I'll give my own, interpretation of digital transformation, and it's really could be driven in two ways. So one is more from the aspect that Ian was talking about, right? A company says, hey, we want to change how we do business. And they basically say, we're going to change all of our internal approaches and processes and how we work as a team. And then you need some sort of tool to help you automate all of that or do that easier, right? And then as an example, you bring in Salesforce, and Salesforce will help you run all those new business processes, or run that new marketing campaign you're coming up with, or run the new way that sales teams are organizing each other. So you basically apply the tool to help these business transformations. But from the other angle is sometimes the technology itself will drive the business changes you make to catch up to the technology, right? And actually, probably the easiest example you can think of is when I was at Adelphi, we used to go to Roosevelt Field Mall. So you would always go to the mall, and that's where you went and you did all your shopping, right? Most people didn't buy things online back in 2009, I guess, when I graduated. But then after that, website started becoming more popular and people were more and more likely to go online and start ordering things to be delivered to their house. You try on your own things and you ship them back. And now currently you get most of your things probably through Instagram, right? Or some sort of social app where basically it's already tracking all your clicks, it's tracking all your interests. This company knows everything you like and don't like, and then they can specifically sell and target you exactly those things, and you can get them straight from your social app, right? So that's an example of the technology came out first, and then companies figured out how to use the technology to change how they do business, in my opinion, right? Instagram came out first before anyone figured out how to monetize and sell jeans on Instagram. So it can be driven from both angles. The most recent way I implemented it for a customer is one of my customers is a top management consulting company. So think about like Bateman Company or McKinsey or Boston Consulting Group. While they're very good at doing that, what they weren't very good at doing internally was figuring out how to team up to help their customers out, right? So you would have one of these partners reaching out to, let's say, someone at Coca-Cola and saying, hey, we want to help you by implementing some new technology. But they had no idea that 3 other people who work in their company already have a relationship with this person, right? And they should be pulling in those people and finding out the history of the conversations with this person from Coca-Cola. They also didn't know where to go find the subject matter experts. So let's say Bain & Company is trying to implement a new technology for their customer. Who are the experts locally or in my region who can speak and be the experts that I can pull into these calls? So they had no way of quickly pulling the right team together to go after some of these large deals and these large customer engagements. So what we did is we used Salesforce to build an algorithm where basically we know every single person in their company, we know what those people are good at, we know what their strengths are, we know when you should be pulling them into what type of deal, and the system automatically pulls that team together. So if you are a salesperson going to talk to that customer for the first time, within seconds by going to that customer's profile, you would see these other 3 people in the company have strong relationships with this person. Here's what this person has already bought from us or is interested in. Here are the 7 people in the company that are experts, and they're going to help me sell this other technology that I'm trying to sell. So extremely beneficial from building that organization. It's the technology putting that team together based on some requirements we've defined. But from the customer point of view, it's very efficient. So all of a sudden, when they come to you, they've got all their ducks in a row. They've already figured out what you're interested in, how to approach you, who the right people are, and you don't have to have 6-7 meetings in a row that might be a waste of time to get to the point where you have the right conversation, right? So it's a time saver from the customer as well.
Great, thank you. That definitely picked up on what Ian just spoke about in terms of going from the larger overarching transformational change to how to implement it to make sure you have one united front out to the customer. So Aniel, how does Optimizely define digital transformation, and what's a client problem you solved?
Yeah, so we spoke earlier and I was trying to rack my brains about, what did I want to talk about here? You called out Domino's as a customer of ours. I've got a couple of other examples that I actually want to dive into here. But
Sure.
First, let me talk about digital transformation. So my personal view is maybe a bit more myopic, but what I have found repeatedly in talking to customers over the course of my career is when customers are looking to adopt technology to solve a problem, the number one problem that they're trying to solve for is agility. They want to know what's happening in their business. They want to know how to move faster. They want to know how to de-risk things. In the sales cycle, they want to know, how do I know whether this customer is a good fit for us or not? How do I know if I'm talking to the right people? And all of these tools are really about increasing agility. Agility can be obtained through a couple of discrete steps. So the first step that is an absolute requirement is clear institutional knowledge about what's happening. What are your business drivers? What are your customer touch points? What are your inputs and your outputs that result in the metrics that you care about? And then you need to affect the ability to change the inputs on a rapid scale. The faster, the better. In software development, we talk about DevOps and we talk about release cycles, and the frequency of releasing new software is directly correlated to customer satisfaction. It doesn't even matter what you're shipping. As long as things are changing frequently, you wind up with better outcomes. It's just the law of averages and random drunk walks applied to real life. The third key thing is measurement of outcomes. You have to instrument your business. You have to instrument your operation in order to understand what those inputs are influencing as the outputs. So those are the three big things in digital transformation. And when you look at any business that's trying to engage in new technology, new ways of speaking to their customer, it is all about adopting frameworks that allow you to implement those three things, whether it's agile development, whether it's OKRs and KPIs, whatever the technique, what you're trying to drive towards is agility. Getting rid of paper, as the really basic example, is an operation that allows you to move faster. Moving your technology into the cloud, as a really basic example, is something that allows you to flex up and down much more agilely in response to needs as they arise. So that is the hallmark, and it takes the form of hundreds and thousands of different types of projects, but that is the outcome that you're driving towards, is increasing business agility. So when I look at our customer base and how they apply that and how we help them to apply that, I've got a couple of examples. So the first one that I wanted to talk about was Valvoline. Now, Valvoline, fundamentally unsexy business, right? They've got some 3,000 garages that do oil changes across the US. And what do they specialize in? They specialize in being the place that you drop the car off. You don't have to think about it. Your oil gets changed. What they were lacking is that they had two distinct distribution methods for talking to their customers. They have an online store where you can order things, you can schedule service, you can make appointments, you can see what the hours are of businesses. And then they have, in those 3,000 garages, they have dozens of point of sale terminals that know all of the details about what your car is, who you are as a customer. Do you have a life cycle with them outside of just one vehicle? What kind of oil does your car take? What is the recommended maintenance? They mail you these flyers that say it's time for an oil change. They'll SMS you. What they wanted to do was bring all of that under one roof. They had about 22 different systems that allowed them to do these things, and they were all manually connected, totally separate. So by implementing our software, they wound up with a single commerce front end that allows them to operate all of their individual retail stores as their own entities, but with a common catalog. Then they connected it into our data platform, which allows them to know what kind of car you have, what is the service interval, what are the recommended services. And they bring all of that information that existed previously only with one retail location. Now it's across the entire network. And when you log into the website, they know what your car is. So this is an example of transformation that allows for a much more in-depth customer interaction layer than was previously possible by bringing that data into one place. And they can monitor the output and the relationships they've got with customers in each location or as an aggregate across the nation. Another example that I want to talk about was Zenni. So I got a couple of comments earlier on the glasses. The glasses are from Zenni Optical. If you don't know Zenni Optical, Zenni specializes in making glasses affordable. So they looked around, I'm sure you've all heard of Luxottica, and owning every retail location, every brand that exists for glasses across the globe, basically. Zenni stepped in and said, we're going to manufacture on-demand glasses, we're going to send them out, and we're going to make it as affordable as possible. So these were $30 frames. This is a mission statement that I can get behind. Everybody needs glasses if they need glasses, and if they need glasses, they really need glasses. What they have made as their business operanda is the same thing that Zappos, the shoe store, did. They said that the relationship with the customer is the number one most critical thing. It's not the individual good. It is that relationship and how that relationship builds over time. And so they've structured their business around maintaining that relationship with the customer. I can speak to this. You know, $30 individual frame, I know that I've spent about $3,000 over the past 5 years with Zenni. What they do is they instrument every operation that their website has. Everything that a customer can interact with is monitored, is measured, and those feed back into experiments. That's what they use us for. So they experiment on everything from payment methods to banner placement to email campaigns, to recommending different frames. All of these things are experimented. And the aggregate of having all of these experimented on is that, one, you can trust that you're not going to make a wrong decision. This increases agility. You can know what the outcomes are of those changes that you're making. This, again, increases agility because it reduces your fear and uncertainty and doubt about taking action. And so all of these things kind of come together into one massive lever as applied to each customer interaction. So that's kind of how I view us fitting into this space, if that helps.
Great, thank you so much. I just want 10 seconds on the donate button and how that experiment.
Yeah,
changed
absolutely.
something.
So way back in during Obama's first campaign, Optimizely first came to be of note. There was an article in Wired at the time about it. Experimentation as a business practice really didn't exist. And now what we find is across our customer base, probably about 25% of our customers that implement our experimentation platform have somebody with the title experimentation manager, experimentation analyst, experimentation specialist. This is an actual common business title. Back in those days, though, this was not an applied science when it came to business. So the founders at the time, Pete Kumin was the guy, he's still here. He was friends with some of the people that were running the Obama campaign. And they actually implemented web experimentation with the Obama campaign as one of their first customers. And the experiment that they ran that kind of brought them to fame was they were experimenting on the donate button on barackobama.com or whatever the web address was. And by changing the text on there, the call to action, the placement, the colors, what they found was that they were able to swing the donation amount by as much as 5 to 10% through this risk-taking in a controlled way and then measuring the outcome. So that's just kind of the background of where the company came to be. And I think it's a pretty cool story.
Great, thank you. So what I'm hearing is from all three of you that there are benefits internally to an organization that's implementing technology for some transformational goals. And now I just want to move into the end user. And if you were in the end user's shoes, filling out a survey saying, you know, 1 or 2 words about the company you interacted with after going through a digital transformation, what would the customer say? What would the customer want to think, feel, or do as a result of the company upscaling to better technology?
Interesting.
I'll go first if you want. From my perspective, I think that the customer needs to feel heard. So let's start with the basic human need, whether you're a customer or an employee, frankly, to feel heard and acknowledged in terms of needs and priorities. The other thing, which I just really want to pick up on what Anil was talking about, because it's so prevalent right now, is this whole idea of the connection between experimentation and agility, right? If I'm a customer, I want the organization I'm interacting with to feel to me agile and responsive and quick to solve my needs. But it used to be that I think agility was thought of as we're going to change the entire organization almost overnight, do everything at once, 100 things that need to be done, we're going to fix or change all at once. And somehow that's, being agile. And I think the world that we're moving into now is much more what we were just talking about, with lots of experimentation and pilots and testing things out and seeing if they work. And that's the definition of agility, being able to experiment with a few things, measure whether it's better or worse as a result of the things that we're trying, and then make rapid changes on an ongoing basis to adjust. And I think if customers feel that from our organizations, they feel like their needs are being addressed. If they feel like it goes into a black hole, they never hear anything back, it takes forever for even one thing to change, not only do they not see us as agile, I don't think they see us as very customer centric, and it's obviously a huge problem.
Great, thank you, Ian. Alex or Neil, take the customers, the end users point of view.
Yeah, I can speak a little bit to this. So one of the things is, I think a lot of these digital transformations, they end up just getting really good at collecting information about their customers, right? So you have this very clear picture of who you're dealing with, down to extreme details that maybe your family and friends don't even know about you, right? Because if you're thinking about it, it's tracking what websites you're going to, what you're looking at, how long you're spending looking at one item over another item, right? Things you're putting in your cart and taking out of your cart. These companies know so much about you. So it's an advantage to them because obviously then they can tailor how they reach out to you. But for you as the customer, you feel like someone who understands you very deeply is reaching out and communicating with you. And I think, Anil, you were talking about this earlier. It's very easy now for a company who normally doesn't have a face, doesn't have a personality, to almost feel like somebody who knows you and you can trust and build the relationship with you. And that's what they're looking to do. They're looking to build relationships with you, because relationships mean you're going to come back like Anil did and buy $3,000 worth of $30 sunglasses. But that's because now he trusts them and he feels like they understand him, and he's built an actual relationship with a company who now basically presents itself as almost like a human being when they're dealing with you, right? So obviously it's mutually beneficial to both parties, right? The company has a long-term customer now that they're going to reach out to over and over again, and you feel like you've built this relationship and you can trust this company and you're going to stick with them, right? Because they understand you, and you don't want to go through the efforts of having some other company try and understand you better. So that's, I think, the benefit on both sides.
I think that's
Thank you.
exactly right, and super interesting. The example that I was thinking about was over the past 40, 50 years, right? Credit card companies and airlines have done one thing right, and that's loyalty programs. It's amazing how much loyalty is commanded through gamification and knowing that you are someone somewhat unique to the brand that you're interacting with. Brand relationship is incredibly valuable, and the state of how we build those relationships has just grown and evolved over the years from, you are literally a number, but a number with points, to now you can actually be every individual that your company interacts with can be effectively a named account. In our platform, we specialize in two kind of vertical offerings. One is B2B, business to business, and the other is business to consumer. And the interesting thing is, over the years, we've looked at B2B offerings as being fundamentally like you can build these dramatic relationships, you can have named accounts, you can have one-on-one interactions, you can do off-site sales, you can actually meet in person. Whereas B2C, you've just got this named mass of people that you're interacting with. And what we found is that through this digital transformation, through the adoption of different technologies, you can actually have a named relationship with every one of your customers, whether you're Nike or whether you're, just a mom and pop corner store. It doesn't matter. You can know everybody and treat them as a valued customer. And so I think that opens up a lot of doors. The lens that I like to think about this space in is, regardless of how rich a relationship you have, there is still the eyeball economy at play, right? Everybody has so much attention to give over the course of a day. And you as a retailer, as a B2B business, as a manufacturer and distributor, you're only going to command so much of that attention span. And so you can increase the amount of attention you deserve by being highly personal and highly targeted in how you communicate. And the other way that you can maximize the value, the outcome of those relationships, is by becoming very targeted in understanding what that person is looking for. So if you can reduce the amount of time they have to interact with you, that in itself can drive loyalty. And that's where, recommendations and product placement and direct outreach via different channels, omnichannel presence, all of these things have a play there. But overall, customers want two things. They want to feel special, and they don't want to talk to you. So digital transformation, it helps with both of those.
Great, thank you so much. That was great. Okay, so question again, round robin there. I'll start with Alex this time. So transformational change or digital transformation, why do these efforts succeed or fail?
Yeah, I mean, honestly, I'll start with the failing part first. So usually they fail when we show up to a customer and they think that technology is going to solve their problems. They say, great, you guys have Salesforce, install it for me, and hopefully now I'll see my sales go up and I'll see way more leads coming in and I'll be closing a lot more deals a lot faster. And it doesn't work that way. Most of the times you have to have a business transformation to accompany that technological transformation, right? Like we can show them like, here's how other customers do it, and here's how you can use the technology to its utmost, but we have to have a conversation about how you specifically as a company are going to do that, right? And you have to do it in some unique way that's different than your competitors and now how everybody else is doing it on the market. So a lot of the times we fail when they treat it as a technology solution and we're talking to all the wrong people. It's the IT team, it's the people that are, you know, basically all the tech people in the company, and they're the ones making the decisions. Those never go well. You want the end users involved, you want the salespeople involved, you want the sales leaders, right? The marketing leaders involved. And initially the first month, that conversation doesn't even really talk about technology, believe it or not. The first month, you're actually just talking about what they're trying to achieve. What are their business goals? What are their personal goals? And then we figure out how do we apply technology to help you meet those goals. So that's how you become successful. I guess that's the second part of the answer, right? You become successful at first identifying what are the goals you're trying to achieve from a people perspective, from a business perspective, not from a technology perspective.
Great, thank you. And then Anil, I'm sorry for you to always be the third, but I want to go to Ian first since we have the linkage to transformational change on that.
Yeah, I'll focus on two things specifically right now for this part of the conversation. The first one being both a strength and a weakness if not managed properly, and that's the idea of start with the truth and define reality. Most transformational change efforts that I've been associated with that are successful, as well as most of those that have failed, have the same common denominator, which is how well do the individuals involved and the organization collectively seek out and acknowledge the truth and allow reality to govern the choices and decisions that they make. In other words, you know, we are where we are. The situation is what it is. However, in my experience, human beings have this almost limitless capacity to deny, deflect, dismiss data and facts that don't reinforce their preferred view of the internal or external environment. So if you think about it in terms of what we've been talking about so far around digital transformation, organizations are getting much, much better at collecting and analyzing data. But if they don't have a culture and a set of leaders and actors involved who are actually willing to see and hear and translate all those facts and data into decisive action, their transformational change fails, even though they have good access to data because they have good digital systems in place to collect it. So, you know, just to repeat myself a little bit, start with the truth and make sure you have a good handle on the reality around you. One of my favorite quotes that deals with this, Mike Tyson, the former heavyweight boxer, some of you may remember from years back, he was being interviewed for a fight, one of his heavyweight championship bouts, by a member of the media who asked him what his strategy was for the fight. And his response was, everybody has a plan until they get punched in the mouth. And I think what's happening today in today's world is, you know, individuals and organizations are constantly being punched in the mouth by things that they don't anticipate, which is the second point that I wanted to make before I hand it over. There's this common misconception around leading transformational change that somehow successful change is really about being able to anticipate and plan for and see around corners and connect the dots among, you know, seemingly disconnected things, all in the service of trying to anticipate the need for change before it even occurs. And it's great if you individually or the organization you're part of has the capacity to do that. But it turns out that the misconception is those circumstances happen, but they're actually more rare than you might imagine. What's more common is the circumstance where things are unanticipated, they're unplanned for, you didn't see it coming, you did get punched in the mouth unexpectedly. We've all lived the last 2.5 years through COVID, which is probably the most vivid current example that we can all relate to of something that we didn't see coming, but it caused us to have to transform our entire lives and existence the last couple of years. So the point is, back to agility and back to preparedness, that sometimes the best people and the best organizations around transformational change, at least, are people who not necessarily anticipated the change, but very quickly understood it, allowed the data that was coming at them to filter through so that they could act on it, and then took decisive action as quickly as they possibly could, even though they didn't see it coming. That's really important. And if you're very good at that, you have a real good chance at successfully leading transformational change. And if you're not very good at it, you have a very limited chance of successfully leading transformational change, in my experience.
Great, thank you, Ian. And Anil, I'd be interested in your response to this as well about success or failure, and also with what Ian said, because what's coming up for me is that it's hard to anticipate generally, and it's hard to anticipate outliers especially. And yet your organization needs to be positioned so that when it does come, you can handle it. So the capacity, having the instrumentation, to use your word, Anil, in place is helpful when that happens. Anyway, over to you.
Yeah, I love that. And I love what you were saying, Ian. I think that's exactly right. To me, this transformation is so much more about the mindset rather than any particular tool. I think there are two modes of failure that I see happen. One is underinvestment, right? So a business has a certain number of outcomes that they expect from implementing X, Y, Z, and they view it fundamentally as a tool rather than a process or a lifestyle or a way of acquiring and thinking about problems and being inquisitive about knowledge. When customers look at it as a tool, any of these things, by the way, fall under that banner. So I'm going to call out experimentation as the example. When customers look at experimentation and they read a case study of ours, for example, I've got one up in front of me, The Guardian. The Guardian saw 46% increase in subscriptions by doing 3 experiments. What this calls out is basically like the golden result of implementing any one of these transformational policies. What's missing from that is that customers that only implement 3 experiments in a year are guaranteed almost not to see an outcome. They are guaranteed to have negative results or results that they can't explain. They are going to be lost in statistical noise. And where we see success is in companies that adopt transformational practices and policies as opposed to transformational tools. Companies that adopt experimentation are companies that, I believe it's Zoom is running about 600 experiments over Black Friday simultaneously. This requires a massive amount of thought and analysis and investment into a practice, a religion, a policy, as opposed to a tool. And this is what results in agility going forward, is this mindset change from I'm going to implement a thing that's going to make us more agile to I actually need our business to be more agile. And that means a different way of working and thinking about things. And that is a very, very common failure mode. And we see it in our customer retention. It shifts. Customers that implement these sort of practices, they do better as businesses, but they also remain customers for very much longer. They have better outcomes. They become case studies. Customers that don't put in the full investment and don't change the way they process and acquire information, they lose, and we lose them as customers. And that's, one of our major investments is into how can we help those customers to adopt the tools and the mindsets more easily. So yeah, I think those are really critical kind of approaches, and I really like your call out of mindset.
Great, thank you for all of your input on that question. Okay, now we're going to shift to the students. And I want to ask each of you to put yourself in the students' shoes. What skills, hard and soft skills, do students need to work with a company that is involved in the business of digital transformation or transformational change? So Ian, then Anil, then Alex, what would you recommend for students? What kind of hard and soft skills do they need?
Yeah, at first I like to build on this concept of being a good listener, because quite often we talk about the importance of communication in leading some type of transformational change. Usually what most people think of first when you talk about communicating is tell, talk about the reasons and rationale for the change. And, that type of communication, of course, is extraordinarily important. But even more important is listening, deeply listening at the customer level, at the employee level that's closest to the customer, because that usually tells you where most of the problems and frustrations and difficulties are in interacting with your organization. So the listening piece, I think, is really important. I want to emphasize that. The other one is related but separate, which is the willingness to ask questions and poke around a bit at the conventional wisdoms of the organization. Some of the traditions that have been in place for a really long time, where if you're relatively new, like many of our students will be as they enter into jobs coming out of school, you really have a chance with fresh eyes to test a little bit about, why things are the way they are and how they're being done, and are those things still relevant. That requires, by the way, a little bit of courage, because not every organization or person you're going to interact with is welcoming of the idea of questioning conventional wisdom. But that's exactly why that skill is needed, because usually if they've been there for a long time, they don't see the same things that you do as a newcomer in terms of what needs to be thought about differently. Those are the two things I'd focus on.
Thank you. Anil?
Yeah, I think that's exactly right. Again, total agreement. The number one skill set is being knowledge seeking, very acquisitive, and inquisitive as well. I think that the number of opportunities that in my career have risen because I had a deep understanding of one region, but then was able to synthesize information about another region, has presented the most opportunities to me directly. And that does require bravery. It requires asking dumb questions and finding mentors and being involved in the landscape, both within your area, but more importantly, almost outside of your area. And a current example that we're facing in my company is we have two commerce platforms, and the decision on how we move forward with them in my role as CTO could be very much technology oriented. But what's more important to the business and to our customer base is what's the journey from point A to point B, and how do we treat the revenue along the way, and how do we bring those things together? How does it impact our customer acquisition cost? How does it impact our ideal customer profile? Does it make things more concrete or less concrete? And having that surrounding information allows me to be a better sounding board to other leaders in the organization. It allows me to make more informed decisions, because it's rarely the case that any decision is only influenced by the direct facts that are associated with that. So having that mindset of understanding as holistically what's happening in the organization across the business as possible is really, really important.
So broadening your line of sight in an organization beyond just your position.
Absolutely.
And seeing what's going on. Great. Alex?
Yeah, I mean, for me, honestly, I think it's the 10,000 hour rule, right? They say you need like 10,000 hours of doing something to master it. Maybe I'm slow. It probably took me like 20,000 hours, but I've definitely put 20,000 hours in of doing the same thing over and over again to get better and better at it. I think a lot of times what you see a lot of folks who come out of college and they try something for a couple of years, and then it feels like it's still too hard. So they go try something else and they try something else, and you basically end up never mastering anything, right? Because you keep kind of switching. Now, sometimes it's the right move anyway, until you find like kind of what attracts you. You should have some general interest if you're going to spend 20,000 hours doing something. But once you find that thing, it's not going to get easy until you put in the time and the energy. And that takes years and years, right? I think 10,000 hours is like close to 5 years of working a full-time job. I probably didn't start liking my job till after I've been doing it for 10 years. And that's just because finally, all of a sudden, all the hard part was done. I had learned how to do it. I figured it out. And now I could actually go and show off and do it well and be successful. But it took 10 years of not doing it great. Little by little, you do it a little better, right? So a lot of it is just sticking with it until you get that expertise. And then in the end, I mean, what I've seen is, if I'm assuming all of us, but maybe some of us aren't, but if most of us are interested in getting paid more and more as we get better at things, in general, people will pay you in proportion to how good you are at doing that thing, right? So the more time and energy you put into something, the better you get at it, the more people are going to be willing to pay you to have you in their company or on their team.
Great.
So that's it.
Thank you. So we do have 2 questions in the chat, but I have one last question for each panelist. And that is, if you're a student going on an interview, what would you ask your prospective employer about what that company is doing around digital transformation or transformational change? So Ian?
I probably would start with the question, what is this organization trying to change about itself and why? And if you get blank stares from people, or if you ask 5 different people in the same organization that same question, you get 5 different answers, run away as fast as you possibly can.
That's a good one. Okay, Alex.
Yeah, I mean, I agree with a lot of what Ian just said, but it's generally, is there goodwill and intent towards the goal that the company has, right? And you do want to understand that. I'll tell you, a lot of the folks that we compete with, their goal is to get embedded into a company to the point where that company can't survive without them, right? And that's kind of strange, right? Because you're not teaching them how to fish. You're just saying, I'm the only source of fish there is, and I'm going to make you believe that. And then you have to stay with me forever if you ever want fish again, right? So I think it's understanding the approach a company takes to a customer. I know at Salesforce, our goal is to get in and get out. Like my goal is however long I'm there, let's say I'm there for 6 months, for a year. At the end of it, I should be able to walk away and you shouldn't need me again because you're self-sustaining. I taught you everything I know, and now you can go do it successfully, and you don't need me anymore. I think it's important to understand that, and then see if that lines up with your own goals, right? Just remember, when you're going to an interview, you're interviewing them as much as they're interviewing you. Now, maybe that applies a lot more once you've got those 20,000 hours in and there's a lot of demand. In the beginning, you're probably just happy to be interviewed and get a job anywhere to get the experience. But with time, you're going to be interviewing them more and more, and the tables turn a little bit.
Thank you, Alex. So really understanding their kind of mindset around customer acquisition and retention, and what their pipeline is like, really is part of what resonates for me with what you said. Anil?
Yeah, I think I heard answers from both of you that I really loved there. And I think the answer that I would put out there is probably a double whammy, though. It's not exclusively about transformation, but a really, really hot topic these days is change management. How do you encourage new ways of thinking when approaching different problem spaces? And Ashley, I see your question in the chat. That's the question. That's the question that you need to ask, is how do you bring along people that don't agree with change as it happens? And then if you partner that up with, what would you change in your approach from last year? What would you do differently? The answers are going to be very telling, because companies that want to grow and improve, and I really love, Alex, your answer, because every day I think about how can I get myself out of a job? Like that's the holy grail, is make myself totally redundant at my job. That is an approach to change management, right? I want to impart as much of my wisdom and thinking on the organization and replicate it out so that people feel like they are in control of their own destinies. The approach that a company takes to change management holistically is going to be very indicative of how they want to treat their employees as they grow, and how that relationship is going to progress. And I love the example of teaching a man to fish, because the only way that you're going to grow and be exposed to new opportunities is if you're not locked into a role. You want to outgrow your role within the organization, because that's how you grow professionally.
Great, thank you. Ian, do you want to add anything about how you can maintain a good company culture when employees are opposed to change?
Sure, yes, just a thought or two about that. First of all, one of the things I learned from writing this book that I was talking about, was kind of an aha for me, is that it turns out, not to be too cynical, but I do think most people hate change, because it usually means giving up something they're comfortable with or moving to something else that they're less comfortable and familiar with. And so it's easy to get frustrated with the resistance that you're likely to encounter when you're trying to change something important. What I learned, however, is that the only thing that people hate more than change is failure. And so to the degree that you can get people's heads wrapped around the idea of what it takes to win in this marketplace or this environment that we happen to be in, and how do you avoid or minimize the risk of failing where you obviously don't want to, that tends to give you a slightly better than 50% chance of persuading people to some of the tougher changes that you're asking them to take on. And all along the way, even though it's a little bit slower, because speed does matter when you're trying to lead change, even though it's a little bit slower, doing a lot of listening, engaging people on what they see needs to be fixed or improved, or the obstacles that need to be overcome, actually gives you a much better chance long-term of sustaining the type of difficult change that you're putting in place than if you do it in a very hierarchical top-down fashion, where the leaders simply say, you know, we're making a change, this is what the change is, we expect everybody to line up and salute. That seems faster at the beginning, but as I like to say, sometimes you have to go slow to go fast, meaning that you've got to take a little bit more time at the beginning to get people engaged and on board, in order to then speed up, because you've got their full support down the road.
Great, thank you. And the next question, I'll start with Alex. What is the best example you've seen of a company adapting to new lifestyles via the power of technology? And this student's asking, mainly using social media.
Well, I don't know if I don't probably have a lot of examples of social media, honestly. I think, you know, it's interesting because you watch like current events, right? You have Elon Musk, who just bought Twitter, and you see like a clash of cultures, right? You see Elon saying, hey, we're gonna completely slim this down. You're all gonna be coming to the office at least 40 hours a week. And meanwhile, everybody was working under 40 hours from home remote before that, right? So a huge culture clash. The question there is who's right and who's wrong, right? I guess a lot of times, you know, you have your leaders that are driving the change within a company. Does it mean that always the employees in that company should follow that change and that is the right change to take? It becomes actually very confusing to understand like what's the right path to take. So I think companies in general have to define for themselves what their values are and how they want to do it. And I don't think it can be one person that drives that. It is kind of like the overall culture of the company that happens automatically that would drive that change. In terms of, I don't think technology itself can change a company's culture. Like, I don't think installing Salesforce or any other technology in a company will change their culture or how they work. It'll just simply make it more efficient. Whether it's going in the right direction or the wrong direction, you're going to go faster because you have the right technology implemented.
Anil, do you want to add to that at all?
Yeah, this is such an interesting question. We're looking at James' question, right? The best example I've seen of a company adapting to new lifestyles via the power of technology, mainly social media. I think that there's two avenues to go with this question. One is when acquiring customers, when creating that conversation with customers, who's adopting that the best through the preferred medium of the customer, because it's not really about social media, it's about talking to the customer where the customer is. And then the flip side is, how do you deal with change management within an organization? How do you drive engagement with your employees through social media? And I'm really struggling here to find a great example of either of those succeeding. I think finding the people where they are is such a difficult proposition. I can give you a couple of really bad examples. Delta, I fly Delta a lot. And if you recall, about 6 months ago, there was this huge rolling outage for every airline, especially on international travel. And my wife and I were going to Barcelona at the time. And she wound up on a 3-day round trip from Boston to New York because she couldn't make her connection. And Delta's whole modus operandi for addressing things now is via social media. So you have to ping, they've got a rep that's monitoring their Twitter or whatever, they respond, they give you a case number, and then they promptly forget it. This is such a great example of, you know, the democracy of terribleness that we live in. You know, it's lowest common denominator of engagement. But I think there are a lot of companies that do really well on this. If you look at you know, any of the fast food franchises or any of the sassy Twitter accounts that create this brand conversation that never would have existed 5 years ago. It creates a personality for a nameless entity that simply was impossible before. But I think in terms of having a very real connection over social media, that's very difficult for a company to do. I find the same thing within organizations as well. The preferred approach that I've seen done 99 times out of 100 is walled gardens. There are a number of systems out there that allow companies to create social environments within their company. Microsoft has Viva Engage and Yammer and whatever. Stack Overflow, you can buy private Stack Overflow instances if you want to create your own FAQ or wiki for crowdsourcing content and knowledge. These always have a strong failure mode as well. It is a constant battle to drive your culture in that direction. From the avenue of culture and change management, what I've seen far more operationally successful is to embrace where your employees are, embrace where your customers are, and just be there and support them in as flexible a manner as possible. So for us, what that means is, you know, embracing Slack as this is a default of communication. Employees love Slack. Don't try to remove that content and stick it somewhere else in a SharePoint folder that no one is ever going to find. Embrace the cultural norms that exist there and then build on them to create the culture that you want. And then diving over to Ashley's question, I think this is expanded upon by you drive change management, you drive change by meeting in the middle. And the biggest failure mode for change management and where you lose employees along the way is by telling rather than having a conversation. I've been through this a number of times. The biggest failure of my career was when I actually came from Episerver, which acquired Optimizely. And in the 9 months post-acquisition, we lost 80% of our staff. There were a number of different reasons for this. There was burnout. It was a bad exit for them. They decided to move on to new challenges, whatever. But bringing along those people in that environment proved to be simply impossible. It was just a hurdle too far. And it really highlights how much you have to meet people where they are and then grow with them. And this is, I just see it play over and over again. And this is why most intranet sites fail. This is why most internal communication systems fail, because you're not embracing the tools that people love. You're not embracing the patterns and the habits that people love. This is why arguably Elon Musk requiring a return to the office is such a failure. Now, personally, I think that it's a desirable outcome for him. You know, if 80% of the remaining people quit because they don't want to go to the office, he has opted into creating a culture that allows him to maximize his profit and loss spreadsheet. Like, that is a calculated decision on his part. But requiring that of employees that you want to keep around is absolutely disastrous. And it has to be a two-way conversation. You have to explain, what are the inputs, what are the outputs? You know, quoting that lunch is $400 doesn't tell the employee the story of why. We have an office in San Francisco right now that costs us $100,000 per employee.
Wow.
We need to share that, right? The employee is going to say, of course, we got to get rid of that office. That's ridiculous. But without the data point, without that radical transparency, you're never going to manage change. So that is like the number one thing. You're going to hear it a lot as you enter the workplace, radical transparency. A lot of companies say it without necessarily meaning it, but the right companies really want to have a conversation about things, and that's what that term means.
Thank you. So there were so many gems that each of you contributed. One thing overarching that is kind of a simple takeaway, it's kind of instinctive to start at the end, just like looking for the solution and implement it, like get the hammer, buy the hammer and start killing the ants. But it's really about having the conversations up front with whoever the stakeholders are and getting, understanding what their needs are, what their pain points are, what the issues are, and then creating the plan from there. So I think from all of your perspectives, you've all said that. Is there anything else any one of you would like to add at this point?
Good luck.
We're good luck. So I do want to say that we have a number of resources for the students from our speakers that we will be sending to you in an email. And one of them is an offer to get Ian's book, The Secret Sauce for Leading Transformational Change. We will have copies of those made available on a first come, first served basis. So we'll send you an email with how to obtain that. And I really appreciate the time from the students and from the faculty and the dean and from our panelists, especially for a very engaging conversation. And I could stay here another hour, but we all have a place to go. So thank you so much.
Great to be with you.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.